This is Tony, and he runs the Hard4Games channel here on YouTube. Tony is holding an uber rare Ultra 64 controller. And this controller belongs to Shane. And this is me watching Tony's video. Excited on the outside to finally see an Ultra 64 controller in the hands of a collector, but crying of jealousy on the inside. But as they say, from the well of envy, only a fool drinks the water. In other words, you can sit there and be jealous about it, or you can take some action. Me, I'll choose to take some action. So in this video, let's relive some of that 1995 Ultra 64 hype and attempt to restore and convert this beater of an N64 controller and turn it into an Ultra 64 inspired masterpiece. So before we get into this replica and restore, let's take a minute just to talk about the Ultra 64. Dating back to 1993, Nintendo first began to tease Project Reality, which was a partnership between Silicon Graphics and Nintendo for new, next-generation hardware. Eventually, Project Reality went on to be dubbed the Ultra 64, which changed names one more time prior to the retail hardware release in 1996. However, this was a time when much of the information we received was via magazines, as the internet was pretty much in its infancy. There was a heavy emphasis on how Hollywood was using the same tech in Project Reality, which would go on to be used in our video games. As time wore on, Project Reality was eventually renamed the Ultra 64, a name which really resonated and stuck with me and many of the 90s gamers, as the hype surrounding it reached an absolute fever pitch by 1995. While the system would be delayed until 1996, this only added to the hype as Ultra 64 moniker was burned into everyone's brains as they patiently awaited the launch. When the launch finally happened, one of the glaring differences besides the name was the controller. While the controller did retain the trident design that was originally pictured and featured in all those magazine articles, the design of the thumbstick and button colors were a major divergence from what had been advertised to us. So my overall game plan is as follows. I want to take this retail black controller and turn it into an Ultra 64 replica. The color of the controller should be about perfect, or at least it appears to be very close based upon the pictures from Shane and the video from Tony. From there, my plan is to cast some nice color matching buttons, or at least do my best as I can considering I only have pictures to work with. Finally, I want to discuss the thumbstick. Now, making a true replica of the stick and the gate would be insanely difficult, but I have a few ideas on how I can get close, which should help resemble the feel of the original stick. So let's maybe take a second to talk about what I'm not going to do. First, the front of the Ultra 64 controller has like a scoop feature in it where there almost looks like they were going to put a jewel or something to that effect. I'm going to omit this as it allows me to use that retail controller as my base. Number two, surrounding the gate is a clock pattern and a circular gate. I probably could have added this by doing some 3D modeling, but considering that the games weren't designed for a circular gate, I'm going to omit this. And number three, the positioning of the letters on the buttons is going to match the retail controller instead of mirror the lettering location from the Ultra 64. And finally, the Z button is going to mirror the retail controller and not the smaller Z button found on the Ultra 64. While I never like to make compromises, these three compromises don't seem like that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. And finally, when this thing's all done, we're going to send it over to Tony at the Hard4Games channel, and we'll have him tell us how close we got to the actual Ultra 64 fit and feel. So step one is to get this black retail OEM controller. And hey, a $13 eBay special? Sounds like it shouldn't be that bad. It's labeled junk and it ships from Japan, but hey, I think we can get this to work, right? And you know, restoring and modding controllers, it's kind of my thing, so let's do it. Well, the controller made it in, and let's just say that the description was extremely accurate. This controller is literal junk. Not only is this stick just absolute trash and completely loose, this box should have come with a warning saying handle with gloves only. As a matter of fact, I feel like I need to go wash my hands even touching this thing. There's accumulation of dust, dirt, and grime for probably the past 25 years. And well, this looks like a prime candidate for this kind of restoration. So with that out of the way, let's rip this thing open. And let's hope that we can restore it back to its former glory. So yeah, remember how I said this thing is really nasty? Here's a nice close-up for you. I wasn't kidding. You'll have to let me know in the comments below if you guys have seen one worse than this. But perhaps the worst part is, we still haven't even investigated that stick yet, so let's go ahead and bust open the assembly for the stick and just see exactly how bad it is. So with the assembly out and it unscrewed, this was my real-time reaction. Oh my good God. This could be one of the worst looking sticks I've ever seen when I've refurbished an N64 controller. You know what? I need a drink. Alright, much better. So clearly we're going to need some replacement parts, and fortunately Ben Ven makes some really nice replacement N64 parts that'll work in here just fine. So let's go ahead and get this last bits cleaned up over here with some IPA and salvage what we can. Fortunately the encoder wheels are still in good shape, and the electronics appear to be in good shape as well. Last step is to clean this desk, because I'll tell you what, I don't know what this is, but it is just so nasty. So while we're waiting for those goodies to come in, it's time to talk about that stick, but you know, I don't know that I'm the most qualified person to talk about it because I don't actually have hands-on experience with it. So let's call up Tony and have him tell us all about the Ultra 64 stick.
Hey, it's Tony from Hard4Games here, and you know, months back when Shane Batty sent me that prototype controller, it was just a dream come true to finally put my hands on something that was Ultra 64. It was just so cool. And there were a number of differences, mostly very small and somewhat superficial, but the big difference was in the joystick. It was longer and also had a much wider diameter for the actual thumb pad. And that sounds fine on paper, but when you go to play games like Super Mario 64, for example, it was weird because there's a lot of movement back and forth, and also the material that they used on the prototype was very, very slippery and overall just kind of uncomfortable. So I was wondering if there's anything that you could do to fix this. When you recreate the Ultra 64 controller, is there anything you can do to fix the joystick? Make it an Ultra 64 joystick, but also functional and comfortable.
Oh, that's interesting. So the original stick was a bit too slick. Well, looks like we're going to have to engineer a way around that. I think the best path forward might just be to kind of make it so I can swap the tops of the sticks at any point. It'll give me the opportunity to experiment a little more and find a way to make that stick a little bit less slippery. Fortunately for the N64 scene, I'm not exactly blazing new territory here, as, you know, Steel Sticks has kind of already figured out a way to do this. So normally I would just do this modification myself and turn my thumbstick into a Steel Stick compatible thumbstick, but when looking at Elman's website, he actually has some pre-modified ones already made up that are 3D printed. The other thing that's really critical about this that I like is the stick is actually a little bit thinner than the retail offering, which is more true to the original Ultra 64 stick. So as for completing this stick, well, fortunately Mr. SG created this model based upon patent documents as well as photos of the actual prototype controller owned by Shane. Now, he was super nice and allowed me to use it. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. SG. I'm going to go ahead and hack this thing up. That's right, I'm going to go ahead and modify the model. I'm going to literally cut off the back of it and basically turn it into a steel stick top. This will allow me to mount it directly to Elman's 3D printed stick, and we should be good to go.
It is the most powerful games machine in the world. It has a new controller that offers a different gaming experience, and it promises next generation versions of some of the most popular titles ever. It's Nintendo's Ultra 64, and it was unveiled last week at the Shoshinki Show in Tokyo, along with demos of 13 games in development, and here exclusively for the first time.
So I'm just pulling these off my resin SLA printer, and you know, shockingly, that worked out much better than I thought it would. I mean, I never had any doubt. So at this point, I'm getting pretty excited. So excited, in fact. I had to do a quick reassembly and start to test it a little bit. And really what I'm testing for here is not only functionality, that's obvious, but really just to figure out how slick the actual thumbstick is, because as Tony mentioned, we're trying to reduce the slipperiness of the stick. So the resin stick top honestly feels pretty good, but you know, considering what Tony said, I'm going to try to take it to the next level and go a little bit further. So what I'm attempting to do here is make a mold of this, and to make the mold, I'm going to use some platinum based silicone. I like this Plat 40 from Alumilite. It works really well, and actually I told Alumilite how much I enjoyed using their products, and they threw me a discount code which I could pass along to my viewers. So if you guys are interested, use the code ROCKER10 if you check out at Alumilite's website, and you can get 10% off your order. I'll throw a link in the description to it if you want to check it out there as well. But anyway, the plan is to make a mold of this, and then we can go ahead and use some different materials, not just UV resin, to go ahead and make our stick tops. I think what we can probably do is use a little bit of urethane rubber to make those stick tops even less slippery. You're going to notice a few other stick tops in there as well, and all those are derivatives of the original Ultra 64 stick. The goal was kind of, like I said, to make it less slippery, so to do that I kind of did a couple different things. The first was to make it a little bit smaller, and then the other one was to add some ribs to it. I believe that both of these should reduce the slipperiness of the stick quite a bit. And while it's not true to the original Ultra 64 controller, and our goal is to build a replica of it, as long as we have the ability to change stick tops, we might as well make these too. And as long as we're doing some molding, might as well do some casting as well. So what I'm doing right now is mixing up a little bit of resin, and I've already made a silicone mold of the buttons of the N64 controller. Now, as previously mentioned, these are based off the original retail release, but yeah, it should turn out pretty good. We're going to make them the correct colors to do our best to color match the original Ultra 64.
Available for your home in 1995, only on Nintendo Ultra 64. Killer Instinct.
Alright, with all that molding and casting out of the way, it's time to do our final reassembly. The last thing I'm going to do is apply some joystick butter. Joystick butter is a synthetic lubricant that's specifically designed for both N64 and GameCube controllers. It works really well, and I really like it. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. So let's montage through the rest of this reassembly, and let's check out the finished product. And after all that work, this thing turned out absolutely awesome. But perhaps the thing I'm the most happy about is actually the rubber top stick. The process of making that was significantly more difficult than one would think, with having to use both 3D printed inserts and then casting a urethane rubber on top. But this controller's journey is far from over. We're going to have to do a little bit of gameplay here, and then we're going to send it over to Tony, and he's going to go ahead and take a look at it as well and let us know how we did. If you want to check out his video, check out the card in the upper right hand corner, because I'll tell you what, he's got first-hand experience with the real prototype Ultra 64, and so I'm very curious to get his thoughts on it. But while this thing looks great, I really want to play with it, so let's go ahead and fire up the N64 and play some games. And what I'm going to do is just kind of screw around with this. This is going to be more interesting because it's going to require me to, the movements aren't going to be as just like simple side-to-side type stuff a little bit, It's going to be much more exaggerated, using more of the gate, and I can already tell you there's a pretty meaningful difference between this and Star Fox. So let me just enter Bomb Bomb Battlefield over here, and let's take a look at this. And I wanted to do it like this because even though this isn't a perfect replica, at least you can get my real-time thoughts. So if you watch my thumb, when I want to go forward, you can see how I'm like pushing on the extent of it, like on the very edge, almost like this. And as I'm kind of like thinking about that, I think that makes sense. It's because the thumb is so, the thumbstick is so big, and the well for the thumb goes in. It's like a, it swoops down versus, maybe being, you know, more domed, something like think of a GameCube, for example. So actually what I want to do real quick, I'm just going to sit right here. I'm going to change out the sticks. Because I'm kind of curious if the smaller one that I made is going to have a similar effect. So let's just quickly change these out. Alright, so I just switched out to the mini version, and you can see it's definitely less of an issue because it's smaller, which it actually feels pretty good. I'm definitely getting my thumb more into the well of the thumbstick. Part of me sitting here right now wondering if we went rubberized, if that would make even a bigger difference. It's not what I would call slick, but it's not exact. I mean, you can see my fingers easily washing against it. I mean, it's the equivalency of probably the feel of your D-pad. It's just like, maybe not like what I would call super texturized, but it's just a little bit, you know, matte, I guess. So it's not like, you know, shiny like, you know, your buttons. So it's not completely slippery, but here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna swap again. Alright, let's try that. Oh yeah. Yeah, so what I would say already is this is a meaningful difference. So as for the mini and rubberized, I think the rubberized feels way, way better. I like the additional grip offered by the Tauruses. They're similar in nature to kind of the retail release. If I would make any changes, I think the biggest change I would probably make is go for more of like almost like more of a dome type feel. So think of like your GameCube stick. Here I've got a GameCube stick right over here so I can kind of show you. You can see with a GameCube stick how it's kind of like more domed right over here with the Tauruses. And I think your thumb just kind of naturally wants to rest like that on there. So I think if I was to make any changes, you know, going forward, that might be the only extent that I make. But I mean, realistically, the goal was never to make an ideal, you know, feeling N64 controller for this. The goal was to replicate, to the best of my ability at least, the Ultra 64. And to be honest, between the different options that I've got here, plus this little custom mini one, I think definitely succeeded in this. Everything looks absolutely awesome. From the fit, the finish, and all that, I'm super proud of the work here.
Well guys, this project was a lot of fun. I really want to thank Tony and Shane and Mr. SG. Without you guys, man, this project doesn't happen. So thank you guys so much for all your help in bringing this vision to life. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you give me a comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys for the next one here soon.